All right, thanks very much. Thanks for Florence. I've been coming here for a number of years. The highlight still is riding a sulky around Vincennes, but lots of other good highlights as well. And it's good to speak now after a few years. When I first came here, we didn't have a company, we didn't have a product, we certainly didn't have a racing product. So to be invited to speak on innovation generally and a little bit about my business is quite a privilege. Green. So look, a lot of this has been discussed for many years. It's been discussed by the panel ahead of us, but you know, I am going to rocket through this and have more of a discussion at the end and let people ask more questions. So get ready for some questions because we'll have some time. We've got declining toad handles, we know that. We've got a declining population betting, although in some parts we've got little pockets and little fresh parts of young people using particular products and apps. The juggernaut really hurting race betting is sports betting and just how prevalent that's becoming everywhere. And if you look at firms like Betfair, where the data is quite visible, you know, they started as a racing product and they only put sport in much later, and sports have exceeded them very quickly. You look at threats and opportunities like the repeal of PASPA in the USA, which may be, you know, a further death knell for Pari-Mutuel racing handle, or it may be the opportunity for racing operators there to somehow dominate the industry by controlling the racing content and adding sports content, and therefore being one of the few people that can offer the full suite of products. And take the Bet365 mantra is that we want everything on our website because we never want one of our clients to have to go somewhere else for a market or a bet type. Racing have problems that we can't resolve in some senses. We can't convince Trev to race for 4 years because she's worth far too much money in the breeding shed. You can't get Frankel or See the Stars to race on, yet Messi and Ronaldo have got 15-year careers that the public get infatuated with and they want to watch that. So that's a difficult element that there's not a solution for that, but we have to be aware of it and deal with it. And we've got regulation, particularly in the UK, and anti-gambling regulation in general. They're becoming a bit negative on advertising, such as Italy. They're becoming negative on affiliates, such as what Sky Bet did. They're becoming negative on fixed odds betting terminals and casinos and rapid type betting. And some of that is a blessing and a curse, because I think you're going to see over the next decade massive pressure on betting on casinos, large volumes and rapidly. And I think racing and sport, where the betting is on an event that occurs at a certain time frame, will escape some of that pressure. What are the impediments? We mentioned them before, and Jason did as well. You know, technology, and it's interesting to see tote systems and how they evolved, but in many senses they haven't evolved substantially, or as substantially as fixed odds have. And part of that's due to legacy technology, monopoly, legacy management as well, that, you know, they've come out of quasi-government organizations, etc. And I do think you need to innovate, or you're going to be in problems against sports betting. And I think one other problem that's not written there, football is a global product, and it's very hard to have a global interest on racing. It's regional, and you can't have a global interest for two reasons. One, of the time zones, and secondly, just an Australian doesn't want to bet on the UK, and someone in the UK doesn't really want to bet on France unless it's the Arc or something like that. And I think that's ultimately a difficulty, that it's hard to look at global liquidity in some senses when you have that environment. Oh, I've gone backwards. Not good. Look, this is just quick, and you look at innovation, and some words are very marginal about change and alteration, and they're all about small steps, and some of them are, you know, upheaval and metamorphosis, and just interestingly, you know, when you type it into Google, it's on the rise, and everyone wants to tell you that they're innovative, and I think a lot of them are such micro changes that they're trying to dress up as innovation. But let's go through some of them. So the innovators down the left, and they're only particular examples. They're not to say that they're the only people in the industry, but I've generally chosen one company that's doing a particular type of innovation that I'll run through quickly. I hope I do them justice. I hope the longitude guys are there as the #1 innovators. They're happy with me. But I've always found the longitude, and I don't think it's a perfect solution. I think in some market it's not needed. But as a mathematician, I've always found it very elegant. Global Tote, Colossus Bets, a little pool that no one would have heard of in the UK called iPools. Looking at people that build variable pools like the Chinese sports lottery, which I'll explain in a minute, handicap tournaments, and what sort of innovations can you have? You can have, and they're bet innovations, and some of these innovations merge with marketing innovations rather than just product innovations, but you can have single winner bonuses. And look, there's not much on that list that you won't have seen in some guys somewhere, but it's still not prevalent throughout the pari-mutuel industry everywhere. I was going to say, I thought I'd been talking 19 minutes, but it's counting backwards. You've got single winner bonuses. We see them in the rainbows in Florida. We see them in ATG. But again, a lot of places are not using them yet. We have cash out. I'm only aware of it in 2 pari-mutuel situations, Colossus Bets and the Quaddy with TAB Australia. Single race exotics, which have not ventured into the pari-mutuel spectrum yet, to my knowledge, but they're definitely growing and becoming more prominent in particularly football betting, so what would be a single game exotic. So you say, I'm going to bet on the score to be 2-1, I'm going to bet on Man U to score in both halves, and I'm going to bet on Pogba to be a goal scorer, and more than 7 yellow cards and more than 3 corners. And they say, right, 1,500 to 1. So again, you know, you can just kind of get a UX and click on all the things that you think will happen on the game or might happen in the next 5 minutes or the next half or the next 15 minutes. Now, you can do that, and there is a growth in race betting in the UK where if there's a very short price favourite, you now bet on its margin. You know, you don't take 1 to 3 or $1.33 that it will win. You take $2 that it will win by 5 lengths or more. So there's that sort of distance bet, single race exotics. And you could do a single race exotic to say, I want to bet on Enabled to win the Arc and so to run in the last 5 and some other horse to fill a place. Well, you know, you can model all of that very quickly. It's a bit tricky in a pari-mutuel situation if you don't necessarily use a longitude or a seeded pool or something like that. But that's the sort of thing you're going to get from fixed odds race betting, putting pressure on this as well. You've got in-running betting, which I'm personally opposed to on general fairness grounds, and I think that if you have in-running betting that can't be explicitly and precisely policed, you run into a situation where there are certain participants that extract 10, 15, 20% on turnover, and they're not conducive to the industry, and they're not conducive to money going back into racing. You've got syndicate products. So we at Colossus have more of a crowdfunding syndicate product. People like the Nordics have more of a club syndicate product that you get into early and then the club places the bet. I think some of the innovations that don't exist in the world at the moment that you will see and we're working on at home, and I'll quickly run through them now. But I think when you look at takeout of product, I think you can look at, people say, oh, we have variable takeout on a V75 or win pool. I think you should have variable takeout on whether there's 3 runners or 15 runners. Why don't you have a pool that has 1% takeout per runner? Well, now you'll beat fixed odds racing on every race. Now, if you look typically around the world, and let's take some sort of win takeout of around 14, 15%, and you look at fixed odds racing around the world generally runs at about 1.25% to 1.5% per runner. The break-even point where the tote competes is about 11 runners. So more than 11 runners, tote odds are better than fixed odds. Less than 11 runners the other way around. You run the Grand National in the UK, 40-runner race, the bookmakers return 155% book every year. And the tote's returning whatever it is, 116% book. And not enough is made of some of those advantages. And at the other end of the spectrum, where you've got a 2-runner tote race or 3-runner tote race, and sadly there's more of those than I'd want, the balance is the other way. Then people would say, well, I can't do that because, you know, the French want 20-cent takeout and they're not going to bet into a pool of 3 runners with a 4-cent takeout. Well, you can build a tote that actually handles that, and you can have variable takeout per runners and then variable takeout per entry point. Now, you run into multiple dividends, but you can mash it all out by numbers and produce that. And as long as the person who's sitting on a track doesn't have the choice to do it through some other avenue, which mostly he won't, and if he does anyway, like going online, you're going to lose his handle to Bet365 rather than to someone else anyway, rather than to a different version of your own product. So let's go through them quickly, and again, hopefully I do Longitude justice. But look, for those who don't know it, it's basically breaking down every bet type to the base bet type. So you look at saying, if I want to back a horse to win, and someone else wants to back a horse in a quinella, and someone else wants to back a horse in a trifecta, in real terms, when I bet on a horse to win, I'm really betting on all the trifectas that exist where that horse wins. So Longitude have a really elegant system that says, actually, I'll take his $2 on the win, and I'll put 14 cents here and 20 cents here and 8 cents here and 4 cents here, and no matter what happens, his $2 turns into $7 after the race. And they mash all the pools together in this elegant algorithm by breaking every bet down to the most exotic bet that exists on that race, because all the simpler bets are a subset of the exotic vertical bets. I call V75 a horizontal bet. I call a Quinte Plus or Quinte a vertical bet. And it's very elegant. It gives less volatile dividends. It can let you create a apparently liquid pool type, because you can say, you know what, I'm going to have a bet on the first 7 in order. And only one person in the world has $1 on the first 7 in order. And if they said, oh, you got the first 7 in order, here's your 70 cents back, you know, there's going to be a shotgun or something. But Longitude's going to say, hey, actually, we'll give you 35,000, which that sucked a little bit out of all the other pools, but that's fine because it merges the liquidity of all of those together. Do I have to be closer to something? Oh, there we go. So global tote. Look, I just put them up as an example of sort of a quasi B pool, a quasi low margin tote, a quasi seeded product where, you know, their pools are seeded by, you know, professional organization. Non-ITSP sort of merged liquidity around the globe, and they're kind of just trying to break down. They're trying to do some of the things that I've spoken about: low margin tote, merged liquidity, different technology stack that's maybe easier to handle in one sense, but also harder in another, because they don't interact with ITSP perfectly or always. But I think these guys are doing a lot of good things in trying to make inroads into more merged and global liquidity. This is an example of what I call a variable pool. So in the V75, and the best example is, I don't know its Chinese name, but I call it China 9. And basically you have to pick 9 football games, home, draw, away. But they give you a list of 15 football games to choose from. So it's a merged product between a fixed odds accumulator, where you can go and choose whatever you want, and a Pari-Mutuel pool. So to put it in terms that people would understand, it's like saying a V75, you don't have to choose the winner of race 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can choose the winner of any 7 races on the 10 race card. And you still have to get 7, you still have a consolation for 6 and 5, you still have cash out through the process, you still have syndicates if you want them. But everyone gets rewarded equally. So there's some nuances there, that the person who picks 6 favorites gets the same dividend as the person who might have picked 5 favorites and 2 outsiders in the other races. But I think from a retail perspective, that's possibly not as detrimental to the fact that a person goes, I really don't like that football game or that race, but I've got an opinion in another race. And that's a product that exists in China. It's not a product that exists in Europe or America, to my knowledge. It's a product that we are looking at releasing on our platform in the near future as well. ATG, you know, single winner bonuses, rainbow exotics in Florida, etc. Just one example of people using this sort of innovation to add a little twist to an existing pool, suck a bit of money out, get a headline number that you can market a bit, etc. You can say, hey, 2 million for a single winner. And in real terms, you're only going to pay that out twice a year or 3 times a year, or maybe more often, but you can go for a bigger and bigger number. And there's an element here that if you go for a bigger and bigger number, there's a possibility that you're less and less likely to pay it out because there's not really any single permutations left within the environment. And for those who watched the 24 advertisements that Florence sent around, like I stopped at number 18, so don't question me on the last 6, but their sales were up 60% as a result of introducing this innovation to, I was trying to follow the Swedish, but one of their V75 pools. I think you need to be over here. Here's an example of a fixed odds bet with a Pari-Mutuel bonus prize on the end. So again, it's the single winner inside a football game. Pick 5 or 6 components, yellow cards, first goal scorer, correct score, halftime, full time, etc. And on a given game or on a given day, or BetVictor did it on the World Cup, that whoever got the highest fixed odds bet successful during the World Cup got a £1 million bonus. And whoever got the highest outcome on a daily basis got a $5,000 bonus. And I think where Pari-Mutuel works is, the elements of where Pari-Mutuel work is where you want to limit your downside through a Pari-Mutuel organization. You might have seen last weekend the numbers in the New Zealand lottery. If there's any Kiwis here, even if they won the lottery last Saturday in New Zealand, they would still be here. And I'll tell you for what reason. It's not because they would be sad racing anoraks. It would be because they got no money. The numbers were 3, 7, 9, 11, 13. And 40 people won the New Zealand lottery, and they got 25,000 each. So, you know, if that was a fixed odd environment where the real odds of that happening were probably 10 million to 1, the lottery would have paid out 400 million and been in awful trouble. In December 2015, 11 of the 13 football favourites in England won. Corals lost 25 million, William Hill's lost 16 million, and 3 weeks later, they nearly all won again, and they all lost about 12 and 14 million again, which was a number that they literally had to report to the stock market. It was that important. So I do think the Pari-Mutuel bonus pool, hybrid pool, etc. works to limit those extreme examples where everybody hits and you have a downside. And there was an example in the Sky Bet Super 6, which is a Pari-Mutuel bet, and they have 1.6, it's free Pari-Mutuel bet, they have 1.6 million weekly users now, and they've basically built a $8 billion company on the back of that free-to-play product. And there was an example a couple of years ago where the scores were 1-0, 1-1, 2-0, 1-1, 1-0, and there were 250 winners, and they got like £1,000 each. And they would have all been home fist pumping the air going, oh, I've just won $250,000, not knowing that there are certain parts of Pari-Mutuel pools that are just misplayed by number, by habit, by visualization on the screen, etc. Right, so now that I've told you how good everyone else's products are, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on my own products. Predominantly cash out and adding cash out to existing Pari-Mutuel pools around the world. Taking a liquid pool, whether it's a Rainbow Pick 6, whether it's a Soccer 10 with Pumanala, a Quaddy in Australia, they do it themselves already. UK Racing Jackpot, Scoop 6, Place Pot, V75, etc. To add cash out as a product innovation that I think racing need to do, because all reputable fixed odds operators now of jackpots and accumulators or singles all have cash out available and partial cash out available. Scientific Games digital platform processed 177 million bets on the World Cup, and they processed 7 million cash outs on the World Cup. So that shows you how prevalent it is. And most of those 177 million bets would never have been in a situation of being valuable to cash out anyway, or partially valuable to cash out. So it shows you how prevalent it is in fixed odds. That's all fixed odds business. None of that is Pari-Mutuel. This is somewhere around here. So very quickly to show you our experience with cash out elevator pitch. It increases spend into the pool because a person comes in to play a V75 and he says, I can only spend 8 perms. I'm going to take 2 by 2 by 2 by 1 by 1 by 1 because I can't really afford to lose more than £8. And he says, and I'm not going to win because it's impossible to get 7. But now he says, you know what, I'll take 6 by 4 by 2 by 2 by 1 by 1 because the first 6 I'm going to get through almost certainly, or he'll believe he's going to get through. And he says, I'll cash out a bit after leg 1 or leg 2. I'll cash out 20%. I'll get my stake back, and now I'm playing with your money. So we see increase in spend. It generates a second revenue stream because when a person sells you a ticket for $2,000 after 3 legs of a quaddie, it's really worth 2,200 or similar. And I'm not entirely sure, Paul. Do you take a margin on your cash out? No. Okay. Paul doesn't take a margin. We take a margin on our cash out, and the people are still massively happy. If a person is one football game or one race from winning £100,000, and his real value or her real value is 40,000, and you offer them 35,000, or Paul would offer them 40,000. You know, from a pricing perspective, they can't get that deal anywhere. It's actually a good deal for them, and it's a good deal for you. And then, of course, the people who go on to lose, we had a person who won £350,000 on a loss-making ticket. Well, that's a great story. We also had a person who sold a ticket for £26 back to us that went on to, would have won £2.4 million. Well, unfortunately, you can't do a lot with that. You can't really go and mock your client or something like, I mean, I would, but the PR guys wouldn't let me do it. But it does create engagement and stickiness of the product, and there's a few stats there, and if anyone wants them who haven't photographed them, I think Florence supplies them. This is around here somewhere. Here. Right, I just wanted very quickly, because I have this conversation with a lot of people, and people say, oh, does it change the pool? What happens, you know, if you cash someone out 20,000, well, the jackpot's no longer $1 million, it's only 980,000. It's not the case. And I look very simply here, you've got a very small pool, it's £1,000, there's 2 tickets left. These 2 tickets have both picked the first 4 winners. Ticket 1 has 2 and 3 in leg 5. And number 4 in leg 6, and ticket 2 has 2 and number 4 in leg 6. And I've made it very simple where we've got even 25 and 50% chance winners. So you look at race 5, if 2 wins, you've got a couple of tickets going through. If 3 wins, you've got 1 ticket going through. And if any other runner wins, the pool rolls over. So it just very quickly shows you the mathematics of how you calculate that probability tree, how you calculate the price of the cash out offer. And this is Paul's example where he doesn't take a margin. We apply a margin to that and we send it out to the client. And how, I think the easiest way to think about this for the people who get a bit like, oh, but then there's less money in the pool and how do you play that out, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, imagine you're sitting in a box, and this is where cash out came from. You're sitting in a box, you've got, Trev keeps entering my mind, so I'll say you've got Trev coming up in the arc on a pick 4, which doesn't exist with PMU, so it's a bad example, but anyway. And you've got it for £1,000 or $1,000. You're about to win $1,000 if this horse wins. And your friend beside you is about to go to the PMU window and have $200 on the same horse anyway. Well, I've seen it many times where that person just has the $200 bet at tote odds with the person who holds the quaddie or the V75 ticket. And we know that the quasi-professionals in the Nordic countries have a chat where they hedge tickets with each other once they get to leg 5 and leg 6, and people hedge with each other or hedged on an exchange. So it's really just taking that product or that natural behavior. And Hans was saying, give the customer what they want. The customer wants an exit and a get out, an ability to hedge. They wake up and they say, I want to win $1 million on the V75. They get to leg 6 and you tell them they're worth 180,000. They say, I don't want to win $1 million at all. Give me the 180,000. I'm out of here. Or give me 90,000 and I'm half out of here. So that's the maths if anyone wants to talk to me about it. And then, of course, you have to back that back another 4 legs. You've got to back it back for consolations. But that's how it works. And that's why it doesn't impact the pool. So very quickly, I'm just the male model presenting this, but all of this technical infrastructure and mathematics is run by Paula here in row 2 if you want to come and see her, but I'll do my best job of explaining it. And here's basically saying, we've talked about legacy technology, and I've got 6 flashing zeros, so I've got about 40 seconds left. How do you get this modern feature onto an ITSP pool or an in-house TAB pool or something like that? So the example we give here is you've got an existing host pool of a pick 6 that just has 6 out of 6 or 4 out of 4. And you've got sort of Colossus versions where we believe in consolations, cash outs, and syndicates. So we write a wrapper around the pick 6 pool. We add 2 consolations and syndicates. We sell that and basically become a super user of the original tote. So the Colossus network and customers become a super user of the original tote. The existing shops, tracks, and online can continue to bet in the pool in whichever way, Mark Sense card and FPOS terminal, etc. And if you want, you can take this version and we'll supply it back to the shops and the tracks or the online. And I know that's all different technology, but we'll supply it back through an API or a microsite. So the parts of your legacy system that can't be updated instantly might have the old better pound win or nothing, and the parts like the online shops or the self-service terminals can be updated instantly with the enhanced version. Cash out works the same. We have a central algorithm. We get all the tickets from the pool. We price them all. We send the cash out offers to our network. We send the cash out offers back to your legacy network through an API. If some of the legacy entry points can't participate, that's fine. The vast majority of the pool can participate in the advanced features. And then dividends just flow out in exactly the same way. And we sometimes have a little bit of fun having to interrupt this part of the process that is quite automatic in some times. So some organizations say, the person won 10,000, pay them. And we have to interrupt that and say, well, they already sold half to us for 1,000, so pay them half. But that's all quite achievable. And really, you'll find, if you read William Hill's reports, if you read 365, if you look at Scientific Games, you know, this sort of engagement tool of cashing out a multi-leg bet as you progress is really impressive. They're coming back to your website to check their offers, or you can text them or WhatsApp them or whatever you want. And I think, you know, if you look at, I believe TAB released some figures to show that the quaddy handle was growing after the introduction of cash out, and Paul's nodding, so that's correct. And most of their other pools continue to become under pressure. So it's an innovation that they put on a pool that showed that it increases handle, and we're finding the same. And that's it. I won't bore you with the appendix, so let's kick this little football thing around for any questions.
Well, if I could kick off, first of all, Bernard, it's really interesting to hear a lot of those ideas for innovations, some of them now coming to fruition, but a lot of them were talked about when I was involved 10 years ago, certainly 5 years ago, and we've debated them here many times at the forum. But you pointed out one of the big problems that many of the operators would have in the room here are the legacy technology and what the barriers that presents in terms of bringing new products to market. How can we work with organizations such as yourselves and the others that you highlighted who have this technology available to sort of dovetail that in with some of the legacy existing operators to make sure that there is, you know, more innovation and increasing that speed to market?
Yeah, I think if you look at things like ITSP, they're a blessing and a curse. They're a blessing in that it's standardized, it's global. There's 25 totes around the world using it. So for those 25 to work with each other, it's on one hand easier, but when the whole global industry is down that pathway, the whole global industry is getting a bit more pot committed or legacy stuck. It's also good because if you can write a wrapper or something to an ITSP product, you can hopefully supply to all people around the world. I think the innovators it's not to say that legacy firms don't innovate, they do, but generally the cost of their innovation is very expensive from time and opportunity costs, etc. So I think the way you do it is you rely on the external firm who's generally a bit more young and hungry and desperate to succeed, because if they don't innovate, they're driving Ubers. Lucky I've got a license and I could be picking you up very soon. But I think what you do is you get them to write an easy version. So we write a wrapper, we put cash out up on a microsite, we control the texting and stuff to your client. And if you find indeed that does work, you make the 18-month €1 million commitment to actually integrate it to your central systems, not as a bolt-on. Now, you can turn around and say, well, actually, the interim solution supplied by a wrapper is not a perfect user experience, so you might not see how beneficial it is. So you might have to go to Paul and say, well, how much is this worth, Paul, if we do it properly? And he says X or Y, and you say, okay, we're going to spend 18 months and put it internally to the system. But I think you're going to find, and our first external tote releases this wrapped product in December, so that will be news when it's news. And I think you'll find that when that happens, the first couple will be external wrappers, and then someone's going to say, actually, we want this in the internal tote core system at all of the shop, track, everything level.
Great, well, thanks very much. It's a really interesting presentation there by Bernard and lots of food for thought. Does anyone in the audience have any questions, please, you'd like to raise at this point for Bernard? I'm sure plenty of you are trying to absorb all that information. There was a lot in that presentation, and as I say, as Bernard mentioned, we will circulate the presentations to all participants at the end. Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, it's just for me to say thank you very much. Really appreciate it.